decay, rust, and an eerie silence hang over this once adored attraction, where thousands of people came together to have some much needed fun. But whereas once upon a time Lake Shawnee Amusement Park was filled with laughter and joyful screams as children and adults swam and enjoyed the rides, now there hangs a foreboding darkness as ghosts of the long dead still make themselves known to visitors. Hey there, dissectors. Today we're going to explore the many hauntings and dark history of Lake Shawnee Amusement Park, a place that has had death on its land for hundreds of years. It all began back in 1775 when Mitchell Clay, Mercer County's first white settler, decided to set up home on the 800-acre land with his wife and, brace yourself, 14 children. At first things were relatively calm, but after about 8 years the family were attacked by the Shawnee Indians. They killed 2 of Clay's children named Bartley and Tabitha, while also kidnapping a 3rd child named Ezekiel. Heartbroken and furious over the treatment of his family, he rallied together a group of men and together they hunted down the Shawnee Indians. Sadly, this did no good for the Clay family, as in another act of defiance, young Ezekiel was killed too, by being burned at the stake. What caused this much violence, you might wonder? Had the family done something wrong? Was the ground sacred in some way to the Indians? Well, we will come back to that later, my friends. Nothing much seems to have been reported on the land since this horrible incident, until the 1920s, when a businessman named Conley T. Snidow bought the land to build an amusement park. And boy, did it pull in the crowds. From 1925 all the way to 1966, the location was busy as families enjoyed the cement swimming pond that had 2 water slides and several diving boards. There was even a bathhouse close by, and if you didn't have your bathing suit, you could hire one for just a few cents. To make this as pleasant as possible for the visitors, Snidow even had a large tank filled with sand that he would filter spring water through for the pond and lake. His slogan for the park was, "You can boat and swim in drinking water." But it wasn't just the water sports that could be enjoyed here, as there was also a dance hall, speakeasy, and an amusement park that boasted a ferris wheel and swings. Sadly, tragedy occurred at least 6 times while the park was in operation, with horrifying deaths taking place. There are said to have been at least 2 deaths by drowning. One occurred in 1961 when a 6-year-old boy named Wayne met his end in the waters. Then, on July 3rd, 1966, a young 11-year-old boy called John managed to get his arm sucked into the drain pipe of the pond and sadly couldn't free it. And as horrible as these deaths are, the final nail in the coffin came the same year when a young girl, said to be aged between 10 and 12, died on the swings. How did this happen? Well, the park was taking delivery of some drinks, and it was while the truck was manoeuvring that it was backed into the ride, killing the young girl. As you can imagine, the reputation of a fun-loving park couldn't be upheld after this much violence and tragedy. The rides were sold off and everything else was left to decay. Even to this day, you can still see the remnants of the concrete that surrounded the smaller pond. But then in the 1980s, Gaylord White, who had worked at the park in his youth, decided to reopen the park with his family. Even though the old fixtures had been sold off, it was thought that a Ferris wheel and swings would be needed for the revived attraction. After buying the wheel though, they came across a set of swings which would be perfect, only they had an interesting story attached to them. Was it fate? Or maybe a cursed object? But when the White family found a swing in New Jersey and brought it back to Lake Shawnee, they decided to run the serial numbers and received quite a shock. It was the exact same swing that the young girl had died on all those years before, and it had come back home. After adding other attractions to the park like paddle boats, smaller children's rides, as well as a stage for performers, Lake Shawnee Amusement Park was ready to be reopened. On the 4th of July 1987, nearly 10,000 people turned up to see what Lake Shawnee Amusement Park had to offer, and at an entrance fee of $1, it was a bargain. But after a few years and with rising costs, something I'm sure we can all understand on some level, the White family made the decision to close down the attraction and instead hold fishing tournaments and other events on the lake. But it was while they were working on an area of land for mud bogging in the 1990s that an astonishing discovery was made. Suddenly, out of the ground, pieces of pottery and pots were found, as well as arrowheads. So after talks, a team from Marshall University came to the park and spent several years uncovering many lost treasures. But that wasn't all. They also found graves, and lots of graves. It seems that during the 1700s, the Shawnee tribe had lived and prospered on the land until an illness struck that was like the flu, and it killed people fast. A very hard and sad decision was made, and that was to move the tribe away from the land, leaving behind the elderly and young, probably as they had the highest risk for death. In the end, it's believed about 3,000 bodies were buried on the grounds. This seems to give us a possible answer to our earlier question about why the tribe's people attacked the Clay family. Maybe they were pissed that a family had moved onto sacred grounds, a place where many loved ones had met their end and were now buried. So with this much tragedy and death, is it any surprise that many people have witnessed the paranormal lurking here? One guest even took a picture of the stone monument that marks the location of where the bodies of Bartley and Tabitha are laid to rest. They claimed that the dark shape of a person can be seen behind it, watching them. Could it be one of the children? And it seems that the young girl who died on the swings in 1966 is still happily playing on the grounds too. Many guests have witnessed a singular seat on the swings, twisting and turning, as if a child is sitting there, even though all the other seats remain still. One youngster who visited the park even interacted with the young girl and was seen chatting away to someone only they could see. Well, they do say that we are all capable of witnessing the paranormal, but over time we become more closed off. If you had an imaginary friend growing up though, many believe that it is likely to have been a ghost. While ghost tours are given nowadays by the White family, they never disclose which swing the young girl died on, but it seems they don't need to, as many guests are drawn to the swing, sensing the young girl's energy. When the girl is seen as a full-bodied apparition, visitors always describe her the same way. She wears a pretty pink dress. And while the young girl is very active, she's not the only one that makes her presence known. There have been sightings of other spirits, including children and Native Americans. One Native American man has been witnessed emerging from the lake and stands at around 7 feet tall. But in the evening, Lake Shawnee Amusement Park becomes something else completely, as a creepy, thick fog engulfs the grounds, and the atmosphere becomes even more sinister. People have become so afraid that they've fled in fear. One man even drove for hours to camp at the park overnight, but became so terrified he left after just a few hours. He claimed he couldn't handle the ominous presences all around him and was actually pushed out of a ticket booth. Not surprising when you consider the number of people who report the feeling of being watched and followed, especially if you're taking a walk along the trail to the Clay children's graves. Here it can get so bad, people feel tight pressure on their chests. Can it get any worse, you might wonder? Well, yes. The little girl appears near and on a tractor on the grounds. The sounds of children laughing and playing is often heard, as well as the shadow of a ghost seen in one of the old Ferris wheel carts. Are they happy to be stuck on the ride, or do they want to get off? But don't think that it's just the grounds and lake that are haunted, as even outside of the property, a ghostly entity has been spotted. Apparently, in 1935, there was a hit and run that took place on Route 19, which runs adjacent to the park. On many occasions, people visiting and those driving by have witnessed the figure of a person walking who suddenly disappears. Well, I think that this location is really creepy. What do you think, dissectors? Have you been to Lake Shawnee Amusement Park? And if so, did you witness anything paranormal? Did you sense something that you couldn't explain? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's episode, why not check out the other haunted locations covered here at Darkness Dissected and the dark history that beckoned spirits to stay. Until next time, as always, stay safe out there.